So this talk is going to be about chance and prediction. And as far as interfaces go, the city itself, geography, is becoming the interface that we are interacting with. All the places we go, all the people we see, is becoming a rich data set that we can learn from. But this talk is also about chance. And heads and tails, this simple chance experiment. I find it really interesting that in modern days, with all of the investment and the big spectacle that is a sporting event, everything starts with this ritual where the referee says this is heads, this is tails, flips his coin, it lands, and the game starts. Right, like this moment where the referee is kind of living it up to chance to decide how this environment is going to work and how it'll be fair. But what does randomness actually look like? These two sets are 100 coin tosses, two different sets of 100 coin tosses. One of them is actually a lie. One of them was a person simulating 100 coin tosses. The other one is actually true. Can you guys guess which one is the actual coin tosses? You would guess? Like left, right? Yeah, so you guys had that intuitive perspective that even though the one to the right is more evenly distributed, the one to the left seems more random, right? So that's an example to say that randomness isn't evenly distributed, right? Now, this book exists and has been around for several years now. It's 1 million random digits with 100,000 normal deviates. This is literally a giant tome of just random numbers. And these numbers are used by statisticians and programmers as a way to validate and be more certain that their systems are in line. Now, I find it really interesting that this book, the way it's used, you just open up a random page and you pick a random number, and that is your random number that you're using for your system. I think if statisticians had more friends, you could maybe just say, hey, homie, spit me some digits, and then your friend would just tell you some random numbers, but that's not really random. That would be a friend telling you, a specific number that they thought of for who knows what reason. But this kind of bibliomancy, where the act of, or the ritual of opening this book and selecting a number, somehow is this random creative act in a way, right? It's like the book almost has an imagination and picks something for you. And I think us as creatives, we struggle a lot with this concept of creativity and expression. All of us want to build things that don't exist yet, things that are part of our identity and who we are as individuals, right? Like manifestation of who you are as a person. But a lot of the ways that you get inspired by ideas is really about the context that you're in, the city that you live in, the time period that we're a part of, and all the culture and conversations that we have with each other influence our perspective and really are kind of a causal chain behind what we end up producing as creatives. This dichotomy can also be seen as the tension between art and science. Right? Art is all about free will and expression, and science is all about these causal effects and causal chains. So, this tension between the two, I think, is something that we often struggle with. And the world is, I think, turning into a world that's more probabilistic. The latest versions of the programming languages themselves are inherently fuzzy, and even the hardware infrastructures that we're going to be computing with in the next few years are based on quantum level variation, which is something that is probabilistic by start, I guess you could say. And I think it's really exciting. And the talk is really about predictive algorithms. which I know sounds like a really daunting concept and something that is frightening to some extent, thinking about how machine learning is going to potentially take our jobs, right? But it's also really about creative algorithms. These processes are able to generate insights, to come up with concepts in interesting ways. So I hope to show you that these systems aren't as daunting as they seem, and to encourage you to start playing with these ideas in your work to be able to better control the vast amount of data that we have in our surroundings. Could we dim the lights a little bit? Is that cool? Yeah. Awesome, thank you. And really, this is where the talk actually starts. So this is all kind of pre-setting. How's everybody doing? Pretty good? Yeah? Having a good morning? Yeah? Thank you for coming out. I know it's really early. We'll try the collaborative experiment after the talk, I think. Cool. I thought the lights were controlled back there. I just threw another random spin in this process. Technology, it's wild. I'm curious, how many of you guys have wearables right now? Like, are you wearing a computer on you? There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Anybody on this side? This is the anti-wearable side. This is interesting how that works, yeah. All right, cool, now we're getting a little moody. I like it, yeah. So, okay, creative algorithms, right? These systems that are able to generate some insight that maybe we didn't have by ourselves as creatives. Now, looking at the history of this concept, I found a really, really great example from over 2,000 years ago. It's called the I Ching. Anybody familiar with the I Ching? We got a couple. Cool. So this book is considered one of the Chinese classics, and the book itself compressed another 2,000 years of oral history into these 64 poems. These 64 poems were these very beautiful little stories about the history of this culture. And this beautiful book encoded all of this great information for people to access. Now, the way you access this information was this predictive algorithm, essentially. You would come to somebody that had the book, you would ask a question, and you would go through this ritual through which the system, this process, this algorithm, gave you an answer. One of these 64 poems was somehow able to tell you exactly what you needed to hear. Kind of wild, right? And it's over 2,000 years ago that this happened, but it's essentially a search engine, right? And the ritual was you would either flip a coin or throw some yarrow sticks in order to arrive at either a line or a broken line. And after doing this 6 times, you would arrive at this hexagram that would be a direct reference to a particular poem. Now, the system works because it has augmented memory, which is to say, it encoded the 2,000 years of prior history into this compressed system of poetry. It also works because it does this metaphor mapping of the poems as symbols, and the symbols as lines and broken lines, and the lines and broken lines as coin flips, and really the question and then the answer as these metaphors. It also works because it has this conditional causality. You come to it with a question, you bring in some input, the process does its magic, and somehow you get something back. And every step of the ritual adds more value to this system and this process. An important thing to remember is that it was a humble prediction. It wasn't like it was going to tell you, well, it turns out that next week it's not going to rain, so you should probably start feeding your oxes better food. It just told you this poem that was up to you to interpret and understand and contextualize into your own perspective. So this humble prediction, I think, is a very interesting thing to consider when creating these kinds of things. Because inherently, by doing humble predictions where sometimes it's more right than others, you create a variable reward schedule. And this is a really important mechanism for creating user experiences that are engaging. And it comes from some of the behavioral psychology of the past, where if you're trying to incentivize a particular behavior, if you reward the behavior every time, you get a certain type of engagement. But if you reward the behavior on a variable schedule, the expectation of the reward is more exciting than the reward itself. So this variable reward schedule is the reason why horoscope, for example, is still something that people access and read, even though it's been discounted by science for over 300 years now, plus probably. So yeah, variable reward schedule, something really powerful to consider, and really the way a lot of gambling and things of that nature becomes so addicting. And the resolution is getting much better. I bring this slide up, I'm feeling lucky, not only because I'm wearing my lucky underwear today, but as a reference to the Google search engine, right? Essentially, this I Ching process was a search engine. You would ask it a question, you would go through this magic thing, and it would tell you, this is what you were looking for. And back in the day, Google had this I'm feeling lucky button you guys were probably familiar with, you know? And the whole idea was you would click it and you would get a random website, and somehow, you know, usually not, it wasn't exactly what you were looking for. But now the resolution is getting much better, and these systems are actually able to bubble up and present information to you before you even search for it. And, you know, it's getting really, really accurate these days. Now, the first computer came up many years ago, actually, and it was first theorized in 1842, I believe. Yeah, there we go, cool. And it was designed by Charles Babbage and Lady Ada Lovelace. Charles Babbage had done a lot of computational machines. This was during the first Industrial Revolution, so gears and levers and pulleys and steam, essentially, in order to create metaphorical systems that could compute numbers. This is coming up, it should be a picture of both Charles and Lady Ada. Very aristocratic, beautiful people. And I think the magic of what happened with their relationship is that Charles was very analytical, but Lady Ada had the great opportunity of being both raised in a context of a lot of poetry and art, but she was giving access to mathematics and science as well. And she is the one that saw that this machine that Charles had created could be trained to do anything. She wrote this amazing essay where she describes that, you know, if you combine the analytical engine with a system of punch cards, you could train it to do creative efforts as well. And, you know, back in 1842, she essentially said, one day we could have a thinking machine. And this is over 200 years ago now. It wasn't built during their time, but it was built later, and this is what it looks like. And to the right, you see some of the punch cards that would be used to program this machine. And if you remember back the I Ching is just binary, you know, lines, either broken lines or solid lines, much in the same way that these punch cards are either a hole or no hole. And then the cards themselves have different levels of resolution. This is 10 digits, and then the other one has a whole lot more there, yeah. So Lady Ada saw the potential of being able to program this machine by inputting these punch cards. And now the system worked, and it did its magic really because it had this augmented memory. It was able to remember and encode a lot more numbers than just a regular person could do at the time. Also, the punch cards encoded information that could be used in the process. Lady Ada's magic in this thing was that she saw the metaphor. She saw that these loom punch cards could be used to program this machine and added a whole lot more flexibility and potential to the system. It also has conditional causality in the sense that you ask it a question, you do some things to the thing, and then you get some kind of result back. And the resolution is getting much better. So we've been traveling through time, and now we're in the age of personal computers, right? All of us in this room, as we know, we have these glowing rectangles that are essentially supercomputers that we carry with us on our bodies. And I'm currently wearing, I have this computer, which is a head-mounted computer, Google Glass. I'm also wearing a microphone that is somehow connected to this house system and able to transmit my voice. I'm carrying my cell phone, so I'm currently wearing 3 computers. And they're theorizing that by 2020, the average person will have 9 smart devices on their body at some point, right? 9 devices, like that's amazing, If we have 9 billion people times 9, like that's just amazing, the amount of computing that we're going to be able to leverage. But the first wearable computer was actually a shoe computer. Has anyone heard about this one? Familiar with this concept? Maybe a few, yeah? So this was designed at MIT back in the 1950s and then developed and produced at MIT towards the 60s, and they tried it out. It was a system that was designed in order to control a context in which the world is really against you. The way it worked is you would tap your toe, And when you tapped your toe, you inputted information into this computer, and the computer itself did some computation and gave you back some feedback through these 8 motors that would vibrate at different parts of your foot. Why would you use that? Why would this be useful? Well, if you sneak it into a casino, you can train this system as a way to control chance. The feedback loop worked like this. You would tap your toe as a way to tell the computer at what speed the wheel was spinning, and then after a little bit of time, it would vibrate on your foot to tell you which of the octants this roulette wheel was likely to land on. So it wasn't exactly like telling you it's going to be this one. It just told you its chances are within this range it's going to happen. Now the system worked because it had an augmented memory. It had been trained with actual roulette wheels before in order to get a better understanding of what are the chances of it landing depending on the different speeds. The system also worked because it has this metaphor mapping, right? Every time that you tapped your toe, it meant that the computer was listening to the timing, and the vibrations that you got back were able to tell you which of these octants the system was likely to land on. And the system worked also because of this conditional causality, right? Because you tapped at a certain rate, you would get back a certain answer, or a probable answer, let's say. Because ultimately, this was a humble predictor. It didn't actually tell you exactly what was going to happen, but it just told you, chances are, within this range, you're probably going to do all right. And they did pretty all right. They actually increased the probability of winning over chance by 44% with this system. Of course, the casinos have since adjusted, and this is no longer a thing that can happen, but the resolution is getting much better. All of us are going to have many systems on our bodies and much more data with which we can better manifest our free will against the determinism of whatever context we're in. And we're just barely starting the process of this modern wearable technology. So I did this graph a while back, visualizing around 50 or so different wearables and showing the hotspots on the body where they're more likely to be worn, and the different attributes and types of sensors that are used in those contexts. Glass is really, I think, the first general purpose wearable computer. It's able to do a lot of things that most wearables don't currently do. And a lot of the wearables are currently aimed at tracking the lagging indicators of behavior, which is to say, how many footsteps did you take? How did you sleep last night? What did you do a few days ago, right? But it's really exciting to consider that the next generations are also going to be able to give us feedback about the leading indicators of behavior. So for example, how many footsteps are you likely to take tomorrow? And what are the things that you should be doing in order to maximize that? This kind of optimized behavior is going to have a huge impact in our society, not only as individuals, but also as a collective. And in terms of collectives and conversations, there's this really great example of how a very simple sensor can be used in a totally different social context. The Galvactivator, also designed at MIT, is a simple system that measures the galvanic skin response of your body, which is essentially just conductivity. It tells you how conductive your skin is, or how moist it is, really. And this system was used in a research study where they had people sitting down wearing this technology, watching videos of people talking to them. Some people were lying, some people were saying the truth. And consciously, we're actually very bad at making that call. We've evolved in a way that we try to give people the benefit of the doubt and believe them, even if we suspect that they're not being honest, but our skin knows. So this system is able to give you a feedback loop and show you that this other person might be potentially lying to you. The potential social implications of that are pretty amazing to consider. And recently, after the whole Wall Street crash that happened, there's a lot of wearable technology systems that are keeping that whole community more honest, for example. So it's really exciting and kind of mind-blowing to consider how these systems are going to affect our society in the near future. Because there's going to be 3 billion internet users currently, and in the future there'll be more. That means 40% of humanity currently has access to the internet. And as more and more sensors and wearables are going to be part of that, there'll be even more interesting data sets and conversations that we will have around this idea. And the only way we're going to be able to understand this huge flood of information is by leveraging machine learning algorithms. Now, if you're interested and want to learn more about how to use these systems, I would recommend looking into Bayes' theory, the Bayes theorem. It's this very simple formula that gives you insight into the evidence of something happen, or the likelihood of something happening based on some evidence. It's a very simple formula. And if you chain several of these together, you get something called Markov chains. And Markov chains are the way that our neural networks are theorized to work, and is a lot of the ways that pattern matching algorithms and systems are being used to understand our voice, for example, and all of the text and handwriting that we're using in every day. I'm curious, how comfortable are you guys speaking to your phone currently? Like, do you often? Yeah, looks like some of you guys are kind of, yeah. This is going to be evolving. This is going to be more and more of us are going to have multiple of these creative, predictive algorithms to converse with in order to find better answers. Now, this whole Markov chain, this whole Bayesian theory, all this stuff sounds really like magic spells in some form, but really, like, falling back to randomness is enough. Like, just random choice. Bring that into your work because it's delightful and it can create these variable reward schedules that make really engaging experiences as well. And to show you like the power of randomness, really, there's this really great anecdote from when Kasparov played against Deep Blue. That was the first time that humans lost against the machines at chess, at this like reasoning thing, right? The thing was set up so there would be 3 games that they would play. Kasparov won the first one and he lost the second 2. And humanity was defeated by computers for the first time, which is kind of mind-blowing to consider. But there's a really interesting story behind that. The first match, the computer had a glitch, as they often do, right? And this glitch in this machine learning system fell back to random choice. So the programmers had put it in this worst case scenario where if shit goes bad, do this crazy thing and just pick a random, So Kasparov was playing and he's very, very good. I mean, he plays with all the best people in the world and he's playing against a machine that suddenly makes a move that makes no sense at all. Completely random. And Kasparov has been quoted as saying that after that happened, he started playing defensively. The next 2 matches, he was expecting the computer to do something completely irrational, and this expectation led to him changing his strategy completely, which made the machine learning algorithm actually succeed at this process. So it was a glitch and then random chance that led to this success of machine learning history. So with that in mind, thanks for playing along. Thanks for listening to these stories. And I want to encourage you guys to look into this more, to use random chance as a tool, and be humble predictors of the future. So thank you all. Great. And Irma, yep. There's usually a Q&A, so I'm curious if that's going to work. Yeah.
We have 10 minutes for Q&A for Javier or James. So go for it.
Yeah, any thoughts you want to discuss?
Yeah. Why was the music playing while you were talking?
Yeah, so this was, nice. Yeah, we started brainstorming about this concept how many months ago? Like 3 months ago, perhaps. And we really wanted to create a system where it was an engaging experience, this variable reward schedule in a way of this textures and layers and sounds. James has been doing some really interesting things with thinking of music as a system, not just as an expression tool. And do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
So most of the system is set up to a chance. Like harmonies that come from like all of the notes are playing at random times and intervals, so the harmonies change. And then I'm processing his voice, and a lot of the instrumentation is played through by chance. So like I'm just bringing those moments of chance in and out of the mix. And essentially we're supposed to have it where you guys were cueing a lot of the sounds with the phone. So that'll be an element of chance, and then I'll process that. But we didn't have that happen, so we played.
Computer glitches, you know? It happens. Yeah, we did get to try it earlier, and we'll try it again, I think, after if you guys want to stick around.
But the idea was having a system that was randomized and would play by itself, and then you implementing like a little control here and there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Hey Javier, I thought the music was great, by the way. I took it beyond just. And for me, it was it took it beyond a sort of stale presentation, and gave it another layer of character. It was fun. Question. So you presented a lot of concepts here, Javier. One of the ideas that I really liked, that I think I got out of the talk, was the idea of computing and wearables being an amplifier for free will, for human free will. So I'm curious about how you apply the concepts you talked about here in the workroom. Do you have some examples maybe that you can point at where?
Yeah, that's great. And in the context of wearables, I've had glass now for getting close to a year, and I do wear it often. I'm trying to really understand what this new form factor means in terms of computing and in terms of behavior as an individual. I think in order for this thing to become a general consumer device, it's gonna take some time. But for specific industries, it's gonna be huge. But having said that, as an individual, as just a human being on this planet, this system has enabled me to have an augmented memory in a way that I've never experienced before. I'm taking 10 times as many photos as I've ever taken, and looking back at my history, I'm able to see my timeline and everything that I've done at a resolution that is creating this feedback loop where I'm able to have very visual memories of these things that have happened since I've been wearing this system. So that's one thing. The other thing is sort of metaphor mapping of like how these gestures that I can do in terms of input and output, or even using your voice in order to get this information. It's becoming really intuitive, and it's really interesting. For example, I was walking up to a group of friends who were inflating a giant balloon in order to take some aerial photography over at Herman Park a year ago or so, or less than a year, yeah. And as I was walking up wearing glass, my friend, I was about to introduce myself to this group, and my friend quickly said, "Hey man, how big is 6 meters in feet?" And I was about to introduce myself, and before I would have been like, "Oh, let me find out," and find my phone, and then do the search or calculate, and then like tell him the answer. But instead, I in that same movement, tapped twice, asked this question, 6 feet, 6 feet in meters, or vice versa, and went ahead and introduced myself. By the time I was done introducing myself, I had heard the answer, and I had a screen showing me the answer as well. So I was able to tell them that answer in that moment, just really quick. So the intuitive gestures that are going to enable us to reach this computing power are going to become really, really interesting in the next few years. And I guess the final one would be the kind of causality, right? The causal systems that are involved. In the geography context is really interesting. Whenever you're around an area of town that might be interesting to you, it pushes notifications, and you just look up and see information. My wife and I were in New York, and we were wrapping up the final day of this epic journey we were in, and we wanted to figure out a place to eat. And we were in Hell's Kitchen, which is like swamped with all these restaurants, right? And we're just like, what do we do? There's too many choices. And I looked up, and literally there was a Colombian empanada place that was like down the block. And I love Colombian food, so it was just like, perfect, this is exactly where we're going. And it was like the best meal of the journey, I think. So I guess those are a few examples of how this kind of wearable is helping me as a human, right? But then as far as like doing the work that I do, I was a host at an event called Visualized this past year. 2 days worth of content, really, really great conversations about data visualization, information design, and the future of storytelling. And I had to introduce every presenter as they were coming in and out of the event. So I had created this visualization system for Glass where it pushed all of the bios of all the people and visualized their information. So I was quickly able to review this information before hosting and introducing everybody, for example. Any other questions? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is, like what I'm hearing is a lot of things, kind of getting what you, it's like the feedback loop of like kind of what you want or what you need or whatever. Like in your particular instance, you're getting in New York in the Hell's Kitchen, you're getting feedback on something you would like.
Yeah.
what is there on the horizon about getting, you're talking about convergence, now I'm talking about divergence. Like, what do you guys, let's say you get out of your comfort zone.
Well, yes, this is great. The filter bubble is kind of what you're addressing, right? Yeah. Well, I actually had this wild opportunity to speak with John Hankey, who is the guy, or one of the founders of Google Maps. And he's the one that created this application for Glass that, kind of pushes these, places to you. And I was telling him the story, like, man, it was perfect. I was in this place, and it told me exactly what I needed to eat, And he's like, man, that's amazing, because that was totally random. Like, it just picks a random place, and it pushes it to you. And I was like, are you sure? But you guys are Google, like, like, everything about me. And he's like, no, man, it was literally just random chance. Like, and those magic moments, right? That's that variable reward schedule. It's like, it was perfect. How did this happen, So yeah, but in order to address the kind of idea of the filter bubble, I think it is something that's very important to consider. Like, definitely be very aware of the things that are being curated for you by these systems, and try to break out of it. Have conversations with others, like the people that you maybe normally wouldn't talk to can provide insights into a broader perspective in a big way, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My area of automation is customer relationship management, and I was a very early user of the ACT content management application on the personal computer, and have spent 30 years looking at marketing databases, but also personal contact databases. And it seems to me that there was a program one time, I can't remember what it was, that would give you a random reminder of somebody to call. It would reach down into your database and pull a name out at random, which is a very good thing to do if you're trying to build your network. You go out there, you just collate whatever plans, whatever activities you've got going on, and say, you need to call so-and-so.
Right on. Yeah. No, thanks for that example. It's definitely really cool. Yeah, just random chance, right? That's cool. There's one back there. Yeah. Interesting.
A total recall kind of thing where people are digitally inserting new memories.
Sure.
The dependence you have on digital technology.
Yeah.
Trusting your intuition, because even a computer can tell you by your sweat when it's lying to you. It's like, at what point does the technology and science tap into that primitive instinct of lying versus insertion of memory?
Interesting. This was a very layered question here, but I appreciate your perspective. I think some of the things that I get from it is this idea of the collective consciousness, perhaps, where if we are getting data aggregated by this big group of people, where is the individual in that, and how does that work? Yeah. Sure. Well, I have an interesting example of it, kind of in the practical sense. Facebook, right? You get tagged on Facebook every once in a while, and you're like, oh, I got tagged on Facebook. What did I do this time? And then you look into it, and then you find this photo of somebody you're hanging out, and it's like, oh, cool, this is a cool photo, and it's on there, right? There's this really great system for conditional causality on the web called If This Then That. Has anybody registered for that one? And yeah, you've been poking around on it. There's this little recipe that I love, which makes it so that anytime anybody tags me on Facebook in a photo, it automatically gets copied and saved on my Google stuff, on my Google timeline. So it's essentially allowing people to inject memories into my timeline, which I think has been really interesting. But so every once in a while, when I'm going back through history, I see these photos that somebody else took of me in some context. And it just helps kind of remind me of other people's perspectives on who I am and things like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever remembered that you wrote something only discovered that you didn't write it, that somebody else, you picked it up in somebody else's work?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think it's the attribution kind of. It's an important thing. Yeah.
I think you thought of something, and then you're reading something later, and you're like, oh, I
Sure.
remembered it. I didn't.
Yeah. Well, and I think that maybe that goes back to that free will and determinism thing. Like we're all inspired by each other, and we all learn from each other in many ways and many layered ways. So yeah, finding where those paths came from and and where they might take you, I think is important. And yeah.
When I think about wearables, I think about augmented reality. And I know right now it's a personal timeline, but we've been playing around with augmented reality with education.
Cool.
So a kid will wear his glasses, and right now it's biblical, so Noah's Ark. He'll build a puzzle in the classroom, he'll look at it with his glasses, and not a lot of kids do. So we'll bring in the glasses, he'll watch the Noah's Ark story come to life, the animals will come out, and then he'll be able to talk to, let's say, Noah in the story and the animals. And I know that, we evolve constantly. I remember when it was just a big, fat computer in the house, and we're lucky to have one, and the screen was black or green, and we've evolved tremendously.
Yeah, for sure.
I wonder how, besides for a personal timeline and getting to know people on a personal basis, with augmented reality, what do you predict for this? There's so many different places.
Interesting. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, the education context, I think, is hugely important. Kara, her niece came by the other day, a few weeks ago at work, and she's 2, I think, or 2.5 now. And I've been using this virtual reality headset, much like the Oculus Rift, at work. And this kid is obsessed with dinosaurs. And her mom was like, do you have anything about dinosaurs in your virtual reality thing? And I'm like, oh yeah, I have this demo. It's a T-Rex. I was like, are you sure you want your kid to look at a T-Rex in virtual reality? She's like, yeah, I think she's going to love it. And I set it up. I gave it to her. She put it on and immediately started growling at it and trying to interact with it. And she was not... I guess the point I'm making there is that for the youth and for the kids that are digital natives, essentially, the world is amazing, right? They're still understanding what happens when I drop this and things like that. So when we present virtual reality to them, it's not virtual. It is reality. It just so happens that this dinosaur lives in this box somehow. They don't completely understand all of the legacy and technical things that we've experienced as digital. What would you call it? Yeah, the people that are bridging that gap, right? We grew up in a time when computers weren't there.
We could all put on our glasses and go to the zoo right now with augmented reality.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think it's really interesting that those two worlds are kind of converging. And as creatives, I'm going to put this bug in your head to play with that tension between the two. Take something that's analog, bring it into the digital space, and then somehow take it back out into the analog world, and then bring it back into the digital space. And every time you make these jumps, whatever thing you're creating is going to become richer and richer. So I think it's exciting there. Yeah.
I just want to riff off of what the conversation here. I'm a Montessori parent, and a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and our 10-year-old's been our kids have been in Montessori from the beginning. The 10-year-old since she was 3, and as sort of a counterpoint to the idea of this at least where the technology is today for young children, Montessori posits that learning is an inherently sensorial experience for the youngest children. So there's actually a very active rejection of technology at the youngest stages. No screens, objects you can touch, you can feel, made of natural materials. And so I personally question the use of screens at the youngest stages, which is, a little ironic as an adult. I'm very much technology.
Sure.
So on the Oculus Rift, we had a party at my office 2 months ago. We had my children and a bunch of other friends there as well. And we had an Oculus Rift that people could try out. And the kids were the most drawn to it.
Yeah.
They were completely absorbed by the idea of walking around a Tuscan countryside.
Right? It's a good demo.
Yeah, it's, and they were trying to untether from the computer, running around the room while wearing goggles. They didn't get the idea that it was tied down to the computer. Right? So it was very fascinating to see that.
So to kind of bridge both perspectives, this conversation I had with John Hankey, the guy from Google, he has kids and stuff, and I was like, so as a technologist, you've created all these amazing interfaces that are helping people move around and everything. How are you raising your kids in that context? And he said that, for education, it's huge. Like, you're able to show them the world in these virtual screens. But as a parent, you also have to be very, very careful with how much time are they spending on it, and often actually dedicate a lot of time to trying to show them other things besides what these beautiful screen, delightful, variable reward interfaces are keeping us on. Because they can be very addicting. Like, that's definitely true. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool.
We're out of time for questions.
Great.
But if you're dying to ask Javier or James a question, stick around and ask them after.
Great. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Take care. Awesome, man. Wow.